It was 12:42 a.m. on a cold Wednesday in Cedar Creek, a small town where nothing dramatic ever really happened, until that night. Security cameras at St. Michael's Community Hospital captured something so strange, so out of place. It took the night nurse almost 10 seconds to process what she was seeing. A German Shepherd, large, filthy, eyes sharp like it knew something no one else did, walked straight through the sliding glass doors of the ER, with a newborn baby clutched gently in its jaws. Let that sink in. Not a blanket, not a toy. A living, breathing, bleeding newborn baby girl, wrapped in a torn blue hospital cloth, her tiny foot dangling out, bruised and trembling. And that dog? That dog wasn't just any stray. The name on the tag still hung on the half-ripped collar. K9 Unit, Blitz, retired. No one knew what to say. For 5 whole seconds, every human in that ER froze. The only sound in the room was the baby's soft, raspy whimper and the low, warning growl coming from Blitz every time someone stepped too fast or too close. A dog had just brought a baby out of God knows where in the middle of the night, and that baby was dying. Nurse Emily Rudd had been in emergency medicine for 14 years. She'd seen gunshot wounds, car crashes, even a woman give birth in a parking lot. But this one's going in my nightmares, she later told investigators. Blitz placed the baby gently on the cold hospital floor before collapsing beside her, tongue out, panting hard. His paws were covered in cuts. One of his ears was half missing. And yet the dog stayed alert, head up, eyes locked on the nurses, daring them to try something stupid. Emily knelt down slowly, murmuring softly, "It's okay, boy. We're here to help. You did good." That seemed to be enough. Blitz backed off just a few inches, watching every move as doctors rushed in and swept the baby into a trauma bed. Inside Trauma Room 3, Dr. Lena Cho took one look and knew this child had been through hell. Severe hypothermia, multiple lacerations on the arms and legs, dehydration. "This baby's no more than 3 days old," she whispered. "And she's been outside." Her voice shook. "In this weather?" They worked fast, warming blankets, IV fluids, breathing support. The baby didn't have a name, no record, no wristband, no mother or father walking through those ER doors asking for her. Just Blitz, and Blitz, he paced outside the trauma room like a soldier on patrol, growling at janitors, sitting still whenever the heart monitor beeped, whimpering every time the baby cried. After an hour, they stabilized the infant. She was small, quiet, but alive. And then came the first question that changed everything. Where did this dog come from? Security pulled the footage. There, on screen, was Blitz emerging from the woods behind the hospital's rear service road. He was limping, carrying something. And not stopping once, not for cars, not for people, not even for the automatic doors, just in, direct. Like he knew exactly where to go. Sheriff Thomas Granger was called in. He was still buttoning up his shirt when he arrived, bleary-eyed but alert. He took one look at Blitz and muttered, "That can't be right." Turns out Blitz had served with the Cedar Creek K9 unit for nearly 8 years. He was officially retired in 2016. After his handler, Officer Ray Wallace, died under suspicious circumstances during a cold case investigation. The record showed Blitz had been euthanized, but clearly he hadn't. At 3:15 a.m., Deputy Melanie Wallace, Ray's daughter, pulled into the hospital lot. She hadn't seen Blitz in nearly a decade. She didn't say a word when she saw him. Just knelt down in the parking lot and whispered, "You're supposed to be dead." Blitz didn't bark. He didn't wag. He just looked her in the eye and pressed his head against her chest. Melanie stood, stunned. If he's back, that means something isn't right. She turned to the sheriff. I want to know where that baby came from. If you're as shocked as we were by Blitz's return and the mystery baby, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Heroes for Animals, for more unbelievable true stories just like this. Back inside, the mystery deepened. Nurse Emily noticed something odd about the blanket the baby was wrapped in. The fabric was coarse, old, almost brittle. And on the corner tag, St. Michael's Hospital, neonatal wing only problem? That wing had burned down in 2008. It's impossible, Emily whispered. That blanket shouldn't even exist. Melanie and the sheriff stared at each other. Could this baby have been born somewhere else in the hospital? Melanie asked. They searched the hospital's storage, the old blueprints, the records, and that's when they noticed something else. There used to be a second basement level beneath the pediatric wing, now sealed off, now erased from official maps. Why would they hide a basement under a children's unit? The sheriff asked. No one had an answer, but Blitz did. At 4:27 a.m., Blitz started barking, loud, angry. He sprinted down the hallway, past the nurse's station, toward the far corner of the east wing. His nails scratched at the tile. He was trying to dig. Melanie followed him. Blitz? What is it? He barked at the janitor's closet. Behind the shelves, they found a false wall. Dusty. Weak. Blitz pushed against it with his body, whimpering and scratching. Melanie grabbed a crowbar. With one pull, the drywall cracked open. The air inside was cold and stale. A narrow shaft filled with darkness stretched downward. They found stairs, old, rusted, unused, and something else. Tiny, bloody footprints. No one knows yet how deep this story goes. Who put that baby there? Why was Blitz alive and waiting? What really happened to Officer Ray Wallace? But we do know this much. Blitz came back from the dead for one reason: to save someone. The world never even knew was missing, and the worst part? That baby girl might not be the only one. The stairs creaked like something out of a horror movie. Melanie Wallace gripped the railing with one hand and her flashlight with the other. Blitz, the German shepherd, who'd mysteriously returned from the dead, trotted ahead of her. He didn't hesitate, just walked like he'd been down there before. The air was thick, musty, like mold and metal had married and festered for decades. I swear, she muttered to herself. If I find rats, I'm out. Her boot hit something soft at the bottom of the stairs. She flinched. It was a stuffed animal, an old, filthy teddy bear missing both eyes. That's when she knew this wasn't just an old storage basement. This was something else. She hit record, on her body cam. Blitz led her into a long corridor, the walls lined with peeling pastel wallpaper. Faded shapes of rabbits and cartoon suns still lingered under the grime. At the end of the hall was a rusted metal door sealed with a bolt. It shouldn't have been there. Hospitals don't hide doors like that, and hospitals don't have basements that aren't on blueprints. Melanie reached for the bolt and tugged, hard. The metal screamed in protest but gave way. She pushed the door open. Her flashlight beam hit a row of abandoned hospital cribs, 6 of them, lined against the wall like sleeping ghosts. Each still had a baby tag clipped to the side, and every tag had been scribbled over in red marker. Blitz sat down and whined. Back upstairs, Dr. Lena Cho was reviewing the baby's lab results when she spotted something bizarre. The blood type wasn't registering in the system. Not unlisted, unidentifiable. What the hell, she whispered. She ran the tests again, same result. Then she checked the baby's temperature log and noticed the warming blankets weren't doing much. The baby's body temp remained low. Stable but abnormal. Where are you from, sweetheart? She asked softly, watching the tiny chest rise and fall under the oxygen mask. There was something about the child, like she didn't belong here, not just in the hospital, but in this time. Melanie was still recording when she walked into the far end of the basement nursery. There was another room, and this one had walls covered in paper. Child's drawings, dozens of them. Crayons, faded pencil, watercolor splatters, stick figures, red X's, a dog, a German shepherd. She froze. It was Blitz. Someone had drawn Blitz, a child's sketch labeled in shaky handwriting. He comes at night when I cry. Melanie's chest tightened. What is this place? Then she noticed a sealed plastic container on the floor. Inside, 3 hospital ID bracelets, yellowed with age. One name was readable. Patient NAR04, female, 2009. That's when she stopped breathing. The baby upstairs wasn't a random newborn, she was from 2009. The next call went to the state police, then the FBI. Within 2 hours, St. Michael's Hospital was locked down. Hazmat suits arrived. Forensics poured in. Every hallway filled with agents, nurses, and people who kept looking over their shoulders. But Blitz? Blitz lay outside the trauma room, eyes locked on the incubator. He didn't move, not even when the lights dimmed during a power check, not when 2 agents nearly stepped over his tail. That dog knew. He remembered everything. And now so did Melanie. Sheriff Granger took Melanie aside. Back in '09, your dad came to me with a theory, he said, voice low. He thought the hospital was experimenting on abandoned infants. He found anomalies in their records. Babies listed as stillborn but with postnatal vitals recorded days later. You're saying they were alive? Granger nodded. He traced it all back to a doctor. Benedict Rourke, neonatal director, resigned just before the fire that shut this wing down. But there was never a fire, Melanie said, eyes narrowing. Nope. Just a lot of smoke damage. No official investigation. Your dad pushed for one. 3 weeks later, he died. The autopsy had said Ray Wallace's death was accidental. Slipped. During a hike, broke his neck. But Melanie always wondered why he was in uniform. Why Blitz was found injured and wandering 3 miles from the site. Now she knew. Her father had discovered what was happening in that basement, and someone made sure he never told. Back at the lab, Dr. Cho got another shock. The baby's DNA? It was a partial match with another case. A woman named Emma Langley reported dead in childbirth in 2009 after an accidental overdose during labor. She'd been alone. No family. The baby? Never found. The hospital claimed the infant didn't survive. But Emma had a sister, and she'd filed a complaint when Emma's autopsy report didn't match her known medical history. That complaint was buried. No follow-up. Now Dr. Cho had the proof, and Blitz had delivered it. The press caught wind fast. A hero dog returns from the dead carrying a baby was too bizarre to ignore. CNN showed the security footage on repeat. Animal control called Blitz a miracle. Animal lovers sent donations. The town of Cedar Creek trended for the first time in internet history. But Melanie? She stayed silent. She wasn't ready to share what she'd found in that room. Not yet. There were more names on those baby tags, and only one had made it out alive. Forensics uncovered a freezer unit hidden behind the walls. Inside, vials, tissue samples, infant clothing, some with initials, some with numbers. This wasn't just child abuse, it was systematic, scientific, clinical. Melanie stared at the evidence while Blitz sat at her feet. She scratched behind his ears. You saw it all, didn't you? Blitz licked her hand and leaned into her leg. And that's when she made her decision. I don't care who's still hiding. We're going to expose them, all of them. Meanwhile, upstairs, the baby girl opened her eyes. Big, deep brown, focused. She didn't cry. She didn't blink. She looked at Blitz through the glass like she recognized him. And Blitz? Blitz finally wagged his tail. Melanie Wallace couldn't sleep. She'd been awake for nearly 36 hours, but her mind raced like it had just hit adrenaline again. The images from that hidden basement played on a loop. Baby cribs, red-markered tags, the drawings of Blitz, and that small plastic container labeled Patient Durozone 4. She kept seeing the baby girl's face. Quiet. Still. too still for a newborn. And the way Blitz had refused to leave her side. That wasn't random, it was personal. At 6:42 a.m., the hospital staff wheeled the baby into a secure NICU unit under police guard. Blitz followed, pacing just outside the glass, alert to every footstep in the hallway. A few staff had protested. He's not a service dog anymore, or he's not clean. But Dr. Cho had been firm. He saved her life. He stays. And Blitz stayed. He hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. But the moment her monitor beeped or her hands twitched in sleep, he was upright, ears perked, ready. Even the nurses began to soften. Feels like he knows she's not safe, one said quietly. They didn't realize just how right she was. While the media obsessed over the ghost K9 story, Melanie went back to the source, her late father's storage unit. She hadn't touched it in years. Boxes of dusty case files, police radios, old uniforms, awards, and his journals. She opened one labeled St. Michael's 2009. Inside were handwritten notes, taped photos, and copies of hospital records. But what caught her attention was the last page. If anything happens to me, look under the stairs. Blitz knows. He always knows. Melanie blinked. That line alone unraveled her. She flipped to the index. There it was. Patient files marked Infants AF, each tagged with a case number and a doctor's name. The same name that kept popping up over and over again. Dr. Benedict Rourke. By mid-morning, the hospital's East Wing had been turned into an active crime scene. FBI evidence markers covered the floor. Local officers stood outside every stairwell. But Melanie had a different target. She wanted the records room, the old one. Buried behind renovations and labeled as decommissioned years ago, the door had been welded shut. She had the fire department cut it open. What they found inside wasn't scorched walls or ash, it was order, precision, files, labeled by year, by weight, by gestational age, neatly organized in plastic bins, stacked like school records. But these weren't graduation reports. They were records of children who didn't officially exist. The pages were chilling. Not just names, but charts. Heart rates, feeding tests, drug trials, dosages. Melanie's stomach turned. There were photos too. Small, printed and stapled to each report. One baby had a scar across the forehead. Another had tubes in both nostrils, and several had the same status at the bottom of the page. Subject terminated. She had to step out to breathe. Blitz followed her. He nudged her hand, like he'd done when she was 10, and scraped her knee. "I'm okay," she whispered, though she wasn't. She looked down at him. "You tried to show this to him, didn't you? To Dad. That's why he brought you back here." Blitz didn't react, just sat beside her, watching the hospital's automatic doors slide open and close with the morning crowd. Dr. Lena Cho reviewed a fresh set of lab results. There was something wrong with the baby's vitals again. Blood pressure spiked unnaturally. For her weight, her glucose levels were off. And the strangest thing? The baby's adrenal glands were swollen, high stress markers. But she hadn't cried once since arriving. No tears. No sound, just heavy eye contact and low breathing. "She's been conditioned," Lena muttered under her breath. That's when she realized the scar on the baby's lower back wasn't from birth. It was a healed incision, and it matched a note in one of the underground files Melanie had retrieved. Subject number 004, spinal tap for response study, age 4 days. Melanie returned to the hospital later that afternoon with copies of her father's journal and the files she'd uncovered. She met with the FBI agent now running the case, Agent Travis Locke. Locke was no nonsense, mid-50s, press suit and a stare that didn't blink. He listened without interrupting, then laid his hand flat on the files. "We've seen this pattern before," he said. Melanie raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He nodded grimly. Covert clinical testing in underfunded hospitals, mostly rural. The parents were either single mothers with no legal protection or undocumented patients. They signed forms they didn't understand. Or they never got the chance to. And the babies? Classified under experimental protocols off record, quietly terminated or marked as stillbirths. And Blitz? Locke leaned back. He's the only witness who got out alive. That night, while the baby slept under watch, a nurse noticed something strange. The security cam pointed at her incubator cut out for 11 seconds. When the feed came back, the baby's blanket had been adjusted. A piece of paper had been tucked under her arm. On it scribbled in faint blue ink, "O6 still lives. NW corridor, storage B." The nurse called security. Blitz started barking before the alarm even rang. Melanie raced down to the corridor. Storage room B was rarely used. Just old oxygen tanks, rolling beds, forgotten monitors, but tucked behind the shelves in a wooden cabinet, a small bassinet covered in plastic, wrapped tight. Inside was a baby monitor. It had power. Melanie turned it on. A sound emerged, breathing, faint, rhythmic, then a whimper. Her heart dropped. There was another child, still alive, still hidden, and someone inside this hospital was still trying to bury the truth. By midnight, Blitz was restless. He paced, growled, sniffed the air like something was about to happen. Melanie sat next to him, watching the baby girl sleep. "I don't know how you remembered this place. I don't even know how you got back." She looked into his tired amber eyes. "But I'm glad you did." Blitz leaned against her, breathing heavy, but eyes always open. The case wasn't over, not by a long shot. And whatever this hospital had, buried, wasn't done breathing yet. It started with the baby monitor. That faint breathing. A soft whimper. Melanie Wallace stood in the middle of the storage room, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. Blitz was beside her, tense and alert, nose pointed toward the far wall. The sound wasn't coming from the monitor itself. It was transmitting live. Someone, somewhere inside this hospital, was watching, or had been watching, a living child. She called in the hospital maintenance team and FBI agents within minutes. A technician traced the monitor's frequency to a signal booster hidden in the ceiling, wired to an old surveillance grid. Most of the wires ran dead, except one. It ran behind the wall. Blitz whined. He walked to the corner and began scratching at the drywall, and then barking. Loud, sharp, urgent. Melanie grabbed a crowbar. With 3 hard strikes, the sheetrock cracked, open, and a rush of cold, dead air hit her in the face. She stepped back. What the hell is this? A narrow passage. No wider than a hallway closet, no light, no airflow, just darkness and something old. They followed the corridor in silence. Melanie went first. Blitz stayed close, practically glued to her hip. Behind her, Agent Locke and 2 FBI techs walked with flashlights, weapons ready. 10 feet in, they hit a turn. 15 feet in, the smell changed. Rot, mold, and something sterile, like old bleach and plastic. At the end of the hall was another. Door metal with a fingerprint scanner half buried in the drywall. Non-standard security, Locke muttered. Not part of any registered facility build. Melanie stepped aside. Can you override it? I can do better. He nodded to a tech, who pulled out a cutting tool and sheared off the lock. The door creaked open slowly. Behind it, a single, room windowless concrete. 1 cot, 1 surveillance monitor still powered on, showing 4 black and white security feeds. And on the cot, a child. She couldn't have been older than 2. Thin, pale, lying still under a silver thermal blanket. Her eyes were open, but empty, too still. No toddler should look like that. Melanie rushed forward, pulling off her jacket and wrapping the child in warmth. She's alive, but dehydrated. Blitz stood near the cot and let out a low, mournful sound, almost a cry. The toddler turned her head slowly and stared at him, then blinked. And that's when Melanie noticed. There were no tears, no sound, just like the baby in the NICU. Another experiment, another survivor. The agents swept the room. They found a mini fridge with nutrient packs, a waste bin filled with discarded syringes, and a clipboard with daily logs, dated and signed with the initials B.R. Dr. Benedict. "Rourke," Melanie said aloud. Locke nodded. "He's been dead for 7 years. Or so they told us." A tech tapped the surveillance console. "Feeds are coming from inside the hospital. This wasn't just a holding cell. It was a control station." Back upstairs, news spread fast. Second child had been found, inside the hospital. The press caught wind again, but this time the story turned darker. Louder. Were human experiments conducted in a U.S. hospital? Second child rescued from secret room beneath neonatal wing. Is this America's real-life horror lab? Melanie ignored the reporters. She sat in the hallway with the little girl, now stable, sleeping in her lap. Blitz lay nearby, resting but alert. 2 children, 2 missing patient numbers. And according to the files, there had been at least 6. Dr. Cho met Melanie in the hallway hours later. She held a thin folder with a faded hospital seal. "I found this in archived digital logs. It was hidden under an unrelated billing code." She handed it over. Inside, a list of code names. Project Valence, initiated 2008. Objective: measure resilience thresholds in neonatal subjects exposed to extreme isolation, low-stimulus environments, and non-verbal development protocols. Melanie blinked. They were trying to create silence? Dr. Cho nodded grimly. Emotionless survival. Babies raised without touch, sound, or connection. It's a psychiatric and neurological death sentence. And they called it research. Melanie whispered. That evening, Blitz began pacing again, not panicked, not distressed, focused. He stood near the hallway that led to the east stairwell, the same direction he had come from on the night he brought the baby in. Melanie followed him. He led her down to the old fire exit, then into the underground maintenance, tunnels that wrapped around the hospital foundation. They passed crumbling walls, broken pipes, discarded equipment. Then they found another door. This one was hidden behind a stack of sealed paint buckets and janitorial supplies. It took both Melanie and an agent 5 minutes to move everything. The door was steel reinforced and locked with an old-school key mechanism. No electronics, no badge entry. Melanie turned to Blitz. Where's the key, boy? Blitz stood still, then walked to the corner and pawed at a drain grate. Melanie knelt, inside beneath the grate, wrapped in a plastic bag, a key ring. The door groaned open to reveal a vault. Inside, row after row of cardboard file boxes, refrigeration units, backup drives, and tagged evidence. Blitz sat in the doorway. Melanie stepped in. It was everything her father had talked about, in his journals, everything he had found and died trying to expose. There were receipts for hush money, signed NDAs with initials matching hospital board members, scanned death certificates with altered timestamps. And then, a final folder, labeled Subject K9A, Incident Report. Inside was a photo of Blitz younger, uniformed, standing beside her father. Then a report, dated 2 days before Ray Wallace's death. Subject K9A witnessed unauthorized transport of live infant, showed signs of abnormal attachment. Handler issued warning, ordered to cease investigation. Follow-up. Handler death staged. K9 unit tagged for termination. Melanie's eyes burned. They tried to kill him too. Blitz rested his head on her knee. Outside the vault, Agent Locke made calls. Federal arrests were issued by midnight. Board members, former staff, security personnel, an ex-nurse in Arizona. a former tech in Florida, a doctor in Oregon. Each had signed off on pieces of Project Valence. It was real, and it was going public. By dawn, the little girl from the hidden room had been identified through DNA tracing. She was Natalie Rourke, the granddaughter of Dr. Benedict Rourke. Born after his disappearance. Her mother, a nurse who vanished in 2019, now presumed dead. Natalie had been kept alive but isolated. By whom? And why? The media storm exploded. But for Melanie, the work wasn't over. There were still 2 more children unaccounted for. And Blitz? He wasn't done searching, because that's what he was trained to do. Find what's lost. Expose what's hidden. Protect the innocent no matter what. The hospital had turned into a fortress. Federal agents stood guard at every entrance. Crime scene tape stretched across entire wings. News vans circled the block like vultures. Helicopters hovered during daylight. Reporters were camping out in lawn chairs. But inside, the truth was still crawling out piece by piece. Melanie Wallace knew it wasn't over. There were still 2 children unaccounted for. Blitz knew it too. He refused to rest. Even after bringing the second girl, Natalie, out of that hidden chamber, even after helping locate the secret vault of Project Valence, he still paced the hospital halls like a soldier waiting for orders. Melanie tried to calm him. "You've done enough, boy." But Blitz wouldn't stop searching, because in his mind there were still lives left to save. Back in the NICU, the first rescued baby girl was growing stronger by the day. The staff had given her a name. Hope. She still didn't cry, didn't smile, didn't make a sound. But she followed movement with her eyes, gripped fingers when offered. And every time Blitz sat near her crib, her heart rate steadied. Blitz would lay there quietly, alert, as if guarding something sacred. It was Officer Granger who said at first maybe she doesn't cry, because Blitz already cried for her. Meanwhile, Agent Travis Locke and his team were combing through the vault's documents. A disturbing pattern emerged. Every child in Project Valence had been selected based on one criteria. They had no one. No living family. No records that would raise alarms. Most were born to mothers who died during childbirth or shortly after. The births were real. The deaths were covered. But the infants? Silently taken. The missing 2, subjects 005 and 006, had records dating back to early 2010. Both male, both healthy at birth. But there were no exit records, no death certificates, no transfers, just gaps, blank spaces, deliberate erasures. Melanie stared at the files late into the night, her hands shaking. She remembered something from her dad's journal, a page she'd skimmed but not fully understood. It described a tunnel system built during the original hospital construction in the 1950s. Back then, St. Michael's had a tuberculosis wing, sealed after an outbreak. Those tunnels were supposed to be for quarantine logistics, but they'd been closed for decades. The modern hospital was built on top of them, and if Blitz had found Natalie in a chamber behind a wall, maybe the other 2 were deeper, underground, forgotten, or, worse, not alone. The following morning she suited up, flashlight, radio, gloves, body cam. She didn't wait for approval. She followed Blitz, and Blitz led her straight to the boiler room. The entrance was behind an old vending machine. The floor was concrete, the air dry and warm. But the boiler room had something else. A sub-panel door, partially concealed behind rusted pipes. Blitz sniffed the cracks, pawed at the corners. Melanie found the handle. It wasn't locked, just heavy. She opened it. Stale air poured out. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. And then, Blitz walked inside. No hesitation. They moved in silence. The tunnel was narrow and pitch black. Melanie's flashlight scanned over broken bricks and spider webs, old warning signs and faded lettering. Pipes clanged softly above them. About 50 feet in, Blitz stopped. His ears perked. He looked left, at a steel grate embedded in the wall. Melanie crouched and shone the light through. She gasped. Inside was a room, concrete walls, a mattress, and a boy. He couldn't have been older than 4. Thin, pale. His skin had a grayish tint, like someone who hadn't seen sunlight in months. But his eyes were wide, alive, watching her. "Hey there," she whispered. "It's okay, I'm here to help." Blitz stayed at the opening, ears down, tail still. Melanie called for backup, then used a pry bar to wedge the gate loose. The metal screeched. The boy flinched, but didn't scream, didn't cry, just curled up into a ball and stared. Melanie knelt beside him. "You're safe now." She offered her hand. He didn't take it. But after a long pause, he scooted forward, into her arms. She wrapped him in a thermal blanket. Tears ran down her face. "Subject, Tower 5, she whispered. "He's alive." As they carried the boy back into daylight, Blitz walked beside him like a shadow. The agents swarmed in. Medical staff rushed the child upstairs. He was malnourished, dehydrated, but stable. And then the whispers started again. How? Many more? Why weren't we told? Who's been hiding them all these years? Later that night, Melanie sat alone with Blitz in her patrol SUV. The silence between them was heavy. "You led me here," she said, eyes rimmed red. "You did what no one else could. You found all of them, almost all." Blitz looked up at her, panting softly. She opened a folder in her lap. Subject, Burrow 6, the last one. No name, no age, just a partial scan of medical notes. Male, approx. 3 days old, shows enhanced sensory response during light deprivation. Blitz shifted suddenly. His ears flicked. He stood up in the passenger seat and whined, looking out the window. Melanie followed his gaze. He was staring at the old chapel across the hospital lawn. The chapel had been closed for years. Too much roof, damage, no funds to repair it. Now it was just an abandoned brick building used for storage. But Blitz was fixated. He barked once. Low. Urgent. Melanie grabbed her gear. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." The chapel was dark, filled with old pews, stained glass warped with dust, and a pulpit draped in a decaying American flag. Blitz sniffed the air, then ran to the altar. Behind it was a trapdoor. Wooden, hidden under a rug. Melanie yanked it open. A ladder, leading down. She descended into the darkness, heart racing. The flashlight barely pierced the pitch black. It smelled like mildew and copper. At the bottom, another tunnel. Short, tight, and... Then, a room, a child, a boy, small, maybe 5 years old, hooked up to old IV lines connected to a solar battery system rigged together with hospital-grade equipment. He blinked, looked up, didn't speak, didn't cry, just watched. Blitz stepped forward. The boy reached out and touched his fur. A gasp escaped his lips. His first sound. Melanie crumpled to her knees. She didn't speak, didn't move. Just let it all crash over her like a wave of grief and relief. Subject, 1006, was alive, and finally free. By morning, all 6 children had been found. All 6 had survived things no child should endure. And Blitz? He curled up outside the NICU window and finally fell asleep. After 10 years, his mission was complete. The press called it a miracle. The headlines screamed, "All 6 children found alive beneath hospital grounds. K9 Blitz, the dog who brought the truth back from the dead. Cedar Creek horror case sparks federal crackdown." But for Melanie Wallace, it wasn't a miracle. It was justice, 10 years overdue. It was a dog, betrayed, discarded, written off. who never stopped fighting for the voiceless. And finally, it was over. The hospital was now closed indefinitely. State and federal agencies had cordoned it off. Massive class action lawsuits were already in motion. Arrests were made across state lines. Former doctors, administrators, silent partners. The web of corruption behind Project Valance stretched far beyond Cedar Creek. But what mattered most now, the 6 children, Hope, Natalie, the 2 unnamed boys from the tunnels, and 2 infants found in a storage unit later that week, were safe, alive, healing. Hope had finally cried. Just once. But it shook the NICU staff to the core. Natalie had begun to speak single words, soft, quiet, but words nonetheless. And the boy from the chapel? He never let go of Blitz's fur after they brought him in. Nurses had to lift Blitz's paw gently to insert IV tubes. The boy would tremble if Blitz walked away for even a minute. It was Blitz, not medicine, that grounded them. Because he had been there. He remembered their faces, their pain, their scent. He had held their secrets in silence for years. And now, he was holding them together. Melanie sat in the back of a congressional hearing 2 months later. She wasn't in uniform. She didn't speak publicly. She just watched as lawmakers and investigators debated how it had all gone unnoticed. For so long, the question everyone kept asking was, how could something like this happen in the United States? But the real question was darker. What else is still hidden? Blitz was officially honored in a ceremony at the Capitol. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't pose for cameras. He just sat beside Melanie on the stage, tail wagging slightly, tongue out, eyes calm. The president himself shook Melanie's hand and knelt to pet Blitz. "We owe you our thanks," he said. But Blitz wasn't looking at him. He was watching a little girl in the front row, Hope. She was clapping quietly, mouthing the word she'd learned just that morning, doggy. Melanie retired from active duty later that year. She didn't make a big deal about it. No press, no announcements. She just took Blitz, packed up her father's old case files, and bought a small farmhouse outside Cedar Creek. Someplace quiet, someplace safe. And for the first time in over a decade, Blitz didn't need to patrol at night. He slept by the fireplace. Peacefully. The 6 children were placed under high-level protective care. Therapists, social workers, trauma specialists, everything was set in motion to give them what they'd never had. A future. Melanie visited them once a week. She didn't say much. She just sat in the corner of the playroom while Blitz napped, near the toy bin, eyes half open, still watching. And when they hugged him, when they curled up beside him, Melanie knew. They were starting to feel human again. Not experiments, not projects, just kids. Years later, a journalist asked Melanie one question. "Do you believe Blitz understood what he was doing?" She smiled. He didn't just understand. He remembered. That's what made it possible. The rest of us forgot, but not him. She looked out the window at Blitz resting on the porch. He carried the truth. Literally. In his teeth. There was never any clear answer about how Blitz survived. Some said a hospital janitor helped him escape. Others believed he fled after watching Ray Wallace, his handler and Melanie's father, die under suspicious circumstances. But the chip in his neck was still active, and it logged his location over the years. He had circled back to the hospital, grounds every year on the same day, waiting, searching, remembering. Blitz passed away 5 years after the rescue. He was 16 years old. Melanie buried him next to her father. On the tombstone, she had the words carved. "You remembered what we forgot. You found what we lost." And beneath that, K-9 Officer Blitz, forever on duty. Thank you for following this journey through all 6 chapters. This wasn't just a story about mystery or horror. It was a story about memory, about loyalty, about the silent heroes who never give up, even when everyone else has. So now we ask you, what do you think dogs like Blitz know that we don't? If you had been there, would you have believed a dog over a doctor? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more emotional, powerful, true stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals. We tell the stories they can't.